A celebration of America's upcoming 250th birthday is underway in Jackson County. The Jackson County, Michigan Historical Society hosted the grand opening of Pathways of Patriotism, exploring Jackson County's revolutionary roots. This new exhibit highlights how the founding ideals of liberty and representation sparked during the American Revolution have close ties to Jackson County's history.
The railroad history and the Under the Oaks Convention, the founding of the Republican Party. We're right here. We said that slavery is wrong, and we're going to put an end to slavery. The same party that Lincoln, of course, would then go on to run to. Those roots are embedded here.
The exhibit is inside the historic Jackson Amtrak station, America's oldest continuously operating passenger station. It is completely free and will be on display until December of next year.
Michigan State University